My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks, Sr., your host, and this is Community Focus. This morning, we're very fortunate to have on the line with us Judith Rae Ross, of Skokie, Illinois, and we're going to be talking about the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center, which is located in Skokie, Illinois. Good morning, Judith.
Good morning.
We're very happy that you're on the line with us. I understand you had a fall recently and couldn't make it to the station, but we reach out all over the country, and try to make it convenient for our listeners, especially an exemplary person like you that's going to tell us about some information that we've heard about, but we can get it directly from you about the Holocaust.
Well, I'm happy to do so, and thank you so much for doing this by phone. That street was not very nice to me.
Right. Well, tell us about your connection with the Holocaust Museum.
Well, first of all, I'm Jewish American.
Okay.
And my family, my immediate family was very lucky, but not those aunts and uncles. I had one member of my family, I believe her name might have been Therese or Teresa. She was called Turka. Beautiful woman. She was married with 3 children. They were taken to Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. And within 24 hours, they had survived the selection. But within 24 hours, she threw herself against the barbed wire fence. Her husband and children found her, and they threw themselves also against the barbed wire fence. The question being, what happened to allow that to happen? Mm-hmm. There are relatives I had that did disappear into the night and never came back. And I have relatives that swam the last 3 miles or so into Israel. They're living today. So it's like many families, we lost relatives, keepsakes, family mementos. There were children that were never born as a result of this. Mm-hmm. And of the people killed, I don't know. Maybe somebody had the cure for cancer. We don't know that.
Right.
We don't know that. 1.5 million children. I don't know how you can willfully kill a child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Now, what is the Holocaust?
The Holocaust best is a process. It starts out with people willing to believe idiocy about a group, and then the beliefs turn into laws. I'm going to take a fast stroll down history lane here. 1933, the Enabling Act stripped most Jews of their, those Jewish people that had degrees in Germany, stripped them of their professional degrees, kicked their children out of school, etc. The Nuremberg Act stripped any German that had any Jewish ancestry after 1800 of their citizenship. Mm-hmm. And then after the Nuremberg laws, after 1938, the Kristallnacht riots literally put most Jews in Germany on notice. And then in 1942, actually, they came up with the idea of death camps. Although the first concentration camps, Oranienburg and Dachau, were actually opened in 1934. Mm-hmm. And by the time that Winston Churchill announced the end of the war in Europe, 2/3 of the European Jewish population was dead.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we're talking with Mrs. Judith Rae Ross from Skokie, Illinois, and she's talking about the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center and how important it is for everyone to know about this center. She's an exemplary person, and I admire her for what she's gone through with, and to be on the program to share this information.
Thank you.
So, tell us, you have many personal tales about the Holocaust. You want to share some with us?
Well, I think the characters that my mother's family is from was Hungarian.
Mm-hmm.
They lived in Slovakia, and they lived in near and on the Carpathian Mountains. And some of them, it's an interesting story, were hidden by a woman who was actually, I guess, had some sort of a restaurant or bar below. There were Nazis in there all the time. Mm-hmm. And one day, somebody dropped something. Like, clearly there were people in the attic. And they decided to overlook it. They were on a train going somewhere and managed to get off the train, and somebody threw a money belt afterwards. Mm. And then, because the British, unfortunately, if you look at every crisis today, at the bottom of that, you will find the rule of the British. And I'm not saying this because I hate the British. I'm saying it because it's just a plain cold fact. Mm-hmm. Restricted immigration to Israel, or to what was called the yeshiv, and they swam in. That's how they made it.
Wow.
It's interesting, a personal story. I was born in 1945, shortly before the end of the war in Europe. I was 12 days old, and Lord Winston Churchill was about to announce the end of the war. My father woke me up and sat me on his lap so that I should hear that the war in Europe was ended. Now, I've been told the story. I have no memory of it. But recently, when I saw a movie about the decoding that made it possible for the British to get the advantage over the Germans, there was a picture. There was a picture of Churchill making that announcement, and I thought for a moment, gee, I was there. Mm-hmm, I was awake. I heard that announcement. We had neighbors down the block here on Springfield Avenue, and the mother had a huge tattoo on her arm. Mm-hmm. And she was one of the lucky ones. If you got a tattoo, it meant you lived. She had a huge tattoo. Mm-hmm. And then when we lived in Chicago, the people next door, they were talking about the aftermath, that those people who survived, and they were survivors, they said that there were people that were into all sorts of improbable marriages, grandmothers marrying 20-year-olds, 20-year-old women marrying 70-year-old men, just because everybody was so eager for someone or something to love. Mm-hmm. I had a girlfriend whose mother was in a concentration camp for a year, and she got married shortly thereafter. They came here. And I think her father used to paint these beautiful pictures. You can do it by doing a square at a time. And I think it was his way with dealing what they went through. Mm-hmm. They were born in Munich. She was born in Munich. There was a time when I was at a dress shop. Mother was getting me some clothing, and there were several people at that dress shop. It was a nice shop in the middle of Skokie. I was getting something, and there was a woman dressed in something that basically a burqa would have had less material than what she was wearing. And our saleswoman whispered to me, you know, she survived a camp, but she had been nude for so long that she doesn't like to show anything. Mm-hmm. There are tales of that, a friend getting a striped blouse, and her mother was a survivor, and the mother said, no, you can't wear that. It reminds me of. There are 6 million plus stories in the naked city, as it were. And you're never quite the same. I've known some people that survived the Holocaust and never were able to have humane relationships again. And one of them said, "Don't you see, we're broken people."
I'm wondering, how did the Nazis keep control?
Well, one thing, I thought about my question myself, and I gave a paper in 1996 dealing with some of that, was they controlled the food supply.
Mm-hmm.
They controlled, and you didn't eat if you didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is I'm not talking about Jewish Europeans here. I'm talking about Christian Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
They all had ration books, and they were expected to work a certain amount every week. And it was not. This was not a 37.5-hour week. It was closer to a 60.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did not work, you did not eat.
Mm.
And that's a very powerful. That's a very powerful weapon. And then, I mean, the Americans bombed factories and found them up and working. So it was decided, rather than bomb factories, it was best to bomb electric plants and something like that to permanently keep the factories down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when you did that, people starved. In the camps in Poland, and I'm talking about Christian Poles here, not Jewish Poles, because it was stricter. Poles, on the average, ate a 3,000 calorie a day meal prior to the invasion of Poland.
Mm.
That was immediately cut to 2,000 calories a day.
Wow.
That meant that one meal a day was cut, and the work week was a 60-hour week.
Wow, wow, wow. And I wonder, why did the Germans keep silent in the face of this event?
That is the big question. You know, I could tell you many reasons for the Holocaust. We could go into the Versailles Treaty. We could go into the economic situation. We could go into the fact that the Germans felt betrayed, and there was some betrayal in the Versailles Treaty.
Mm-hmm.
But that wouldn't explain it. People have gone through hardship and not hurt their neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
They were so eager for a leader and so happy to see Germany standing up, that by the time they realized, and many of them realized early, I mean, if your neighbor suddenly disappears, you realize.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They kept silent because they were afraid something would happen to them. Now, I can give you a historical reason. Germany wasn't really a nation. It was a cultural entity.
Mm-hmm.
People spoke more or less the same language, and many people had similar customs. But that's an area where feudalism, rather than the creation of states, happened. And so this was an area yearning to be a state. And after the loss of World War I, yearning for some structure. And, well, guess what? The Nazis provided that structure. Now, nobody thought they'd get elected, but they did get elected in 1933.
Mm-hmm.
And after the Reichstag fire, that was the end of the Weimar Republic and the start of Hitler being called the Führer, or the leader, and things like freedom of speech and the like. They went out the window. But there were people who stood up. Irina Sendler in Poland, brilliant, brave woman.
Mm-hmm.
The Skokie in Poland, that organization saved Jews. And of course, we all know about Schindler. But there were people who did. But there were a lot of people who just stayed silent. They figured there was nothing they can do. And any evil flourishes when you stay silent.
Mm-hmm. Now, this kind of explains why Skokie is tied into the Holocaust, right?
Yeah. Well, what happened, and this is the start of the Holocaust Museum as well. The Nazis petitioned the neo-Nazis, and by the way, Frank Cullum's real name was Frank Cohn. He was Jewish, and he had a bar mitzvah. That's talk about self-hating. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know bar mitzvah training is hard, but most people come out of a bar mitzvah and don't end up hating themselves or their people.
Mm-hmm.
And they petitioned all over. Skokie was the one who said absolutely not, because in the 60s and in the 70s, there was something like 7,000 Holocaust survivors. Gesundheit. There were 7,000 Holocaust survivors, and the thought of people standing in front of Village Hall in SS uniforms and in Nazi uniforms was, of course, repugnant. Now, there is a question of free speech,
mm-hmm.
but I'm asking it as a question in the name of my Aunt Turka and any of my relatives and all the rest of those relatives who perished. Is there not something that can be said to forbid hate speech? If I said that all the, pick an ethnic group, all the X's were, they're all rich, they're all taking my jobs, they're all doing whatever, is that not hate speech?
Mm.
And don't we have laws against hate speech? So it grew. That march became the kind of thing. Someone I know was in China and got asked about it. I was giving a paper in New Mexico, and I got asked about it. We got into a argument about it down in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of thing that it came all over the world. Well, the Nazis never marched. It never happened. But Skokie became known as a place that, when you say Skokie, people look at you funny.
Right.
I've had it happen at conferences, and I just look at these people and say, yeah, I killed an SS man in the bushes, and then everybody laughs and quickly leaves it alone.
Mm-hmm.
But for those 7,000 survivors who at the least were hungry and probably witnessed the murder of their family, some of them, this was not a joke. So out of that, though, came the founding of the Holocaust Museum. And it started out as it was in one of the buildings on Main Street in Skokie. We have a lot of buildings and kind of strip malls there.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it grew into the Holocaust Museum that's on Woods now, and probably, other than the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., the largest museum on the Holocaust in the country.
Mm-hmm.
It's also an education center. You can learn about all aspects of the Holocaust, the life, the lead up. You can see all sorts of effects from it. And if you need help, they would find it for you. And it's a very, very fine museum.
Mm-hmm.
But it came out of this crazy group of neo or new Nazis that decided they wanted to march in Skokie.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering just what kind of person was Adolf Hitler, though?
All right, couple of things about Adolf Hitler. One, if he was anybody else but Adolf Hitler, he would have been in line for a gas chamber at Auschwitz. I believe he had a great-grandmother, an aunt that was Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
The real name of the Hitler family was Heidler. Heidler is a Jewish name.
Mm-hmm.
His family was heavily intermarried. His father and his mother were uncle and niece.
Oh, my goodness.
And even if they weren't blood, and I'm not sure if they were or not, that's a very close thing. And sometimes when people marry too closely into their family, I call it a mean gene, and Hitler apparently had it. Then there was the question of his mother, Clara. Clara got breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And the first breast cancer operation was done in 1896 by a Dr. John Halstead here in America.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a doctor in, I believe, Austria, Dr. Oscar Bloch, who tried. But the cancer had gone too far, and Clara died in 1907. Dr. Bloch, by the way, felt so badly about it, he reduced his fees. I mean, he didn't want this to happen. But Hitler always blamed the Jew. Then, in World War I, for a while, World War I, the reason it lasted, Germany had 3 months resources when the war was declared. Walter Rathenau, who, by the way, was Jewish, managed to find enough money to keep the war going for 4 years. They surrendered when Walter Rathenau couldn't keep it going any longer. And he, by the way, was killed for being Jewish in the 1920s. So the inflation was such, my stepfather went to, when he was a child at the time, but his family took him to Germany to meet the German relatives. And the German relatives papered the reception room of their home with Deutschmarks. When you got paid, you bought things immediately because you knew at the end of the day it wouldn't be worth anything.
Okay.
And so there was that. It was a horrible time. Hitler took advantage of it. When he was captured and put in prison, he dictated his memoirs, Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. And in a perverted way, they must have made sense to an awful lot of Germans. On top of it, with the Russian Revolution, and this is a man who wrote something called Before the Deluge, his name's Adolf Friedrich, a lot of Russian aristocrats and the like came through Berlin. And these people were virulently anti-Semitic. And I can't help feeling that some of that anti-Semitism might have stuck in Berlin and elsewhere. And sorry for those poor aristocrats. Let me tell you a fast story about an aristocrat. I was in New York in 1966 seeing a Russian Easter service, in part because of this was for an art history class. They had some of the biggest emeralds I've ever seen in my life. The service was beautiful. Most of the people very nice. But what was left of the Tsar's court that day was the Tsar's court again. And a woman passed in front of me wearing a white dress and an ambassadorial sash that was filled with medals. I smiled at her. I was a junior in college in my cute little suit with knee socks. And she gave me a look like, I'm here, I can't have you arrested, but you'd be dead for doing that. After that, I began to say, I had another thought about aristocrats, I'll tell you that. Can you picture how a Russian peasant would have felt?
Wow.
So that kind of anti-Semitism came into Germany when many of those aristos headed on for wherever they were going. And that fueled it and made it believable. And these were people that were yearning for a structure. They were just newly united. They thought they'd win World War I. Came close to doing so, but they didn't.
What happened? Russia had something to say about that?
Russia. You had Lenin, And you had Stalin.
Mm-hmm.
Stalin, by the way, had a Jewish grandmother, I believe. He had Jewish ancestry. I'm not sure about Lenin.
Okay.
Stalin made a peace with Germany in 1939, which he thought gave him breathing room. But already in 1939, the Russians were murdering Jews like crazy.
Mm.
And when Hitler came in and suddenly realized when he took Eastern Europe and got within 30 miles of Moscow that he had inherited all these Jews in France, then apparently Holocaust became the idea then was, well, we get rid of them and leave a museum in Prague to know that they were just there. My parents were married in 1941, shortly, a few months before the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
I was not born until 1945, and my best and oldest lady friend about 24 days after I was. And we knew that the reason that they held up having children was they were not sure how the war would go. And they didn't want to bring a child into this world if the child was going to be killed.
Right, right. Wow.
So,
I tell you what, our time is fleeing, and boy, we're going to have you on again. And hopefully,
I'll be happy to be on again.
Hopefully, you'll be your fall with your leg will be okay. And I'm glad there's no broken bones there too. You know.
Well, it was just the craziness, but I will tell you something. There are good strangers. 3 people stopped and helped me up.
We still have Samaritans, you know. And, I would like to say this as we close the program that, you know, with God, there's no male, no female, and no Jew, and no Greek, and no Gentile, you know. And so we're very fortunate that we have a God that loves us all. But when we're disobedient, there's a penalty that we pay for disobeying God, you know. So thank the Lord that He has grace and mercy on all of us. And I'd like to congratulate you for your efforts with the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. So we just can't forget what happened in the past. There were 100 million Africans that perished in the trip from West Africa to this land of what we call United States now. And but I don't know. We just have to keep praying and
we keep praying and we keep working together and we keep saying. There's a line out of a folk song or a folk style song. If they're saying they ain't free, well, they're saying the same for me.
Okay, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for listening to another awareness session on Community Focus. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host.